We're here to talk through this Fillomino by Murat and Tonta. It uses a particular kind of logical step a fair number of times. This is a less common step, so some people find this a harder puzzle. It starts from this one seed in the upper left corner, which has two twos that can't extend into each other. That'd make too large a region. And the very first instance of the rule I'm going to be talking about is really an example of leaving things behind. If this 2 comes to the top, it leaves behind 2 cells. That would be forced to be either a 1 and a 1, which can't work, or another 2 polyomino, which is next to 2 polyominoes. And so they can't leave what's left behind on one side, keeps the 2 from coming up, comes over here. We now get the second instance of the no leave behind rule. If this 3 comes to the right, these 3 cells are left behind. Again, we can't have those all be 1s. If there's a single 2, like a 1 plus 2, it's going to be touching at least this polyomino, and the last option of 3 3s would touch this. And so that we can't leave all 3 of these behind based on what's around, the 3 has to come to the left like this, and we form this gap. We now have a hidden polyomino spot. It has to be at least 3 large, so it's going to take this cell. It does not look like it can become a size 4. It's surrounded by these. It can't become larger than 5, so this has to be exactly 3. 2 3s touching this isn't going to work. So we get this coming across. This 1 means that we need to be connecting in. We now have 2 4s near 2 4s. This deflects around. Something like this. We now have a trickier left behind spot, but it starts right over here. And there's a first way to think about it, which is that if this 4 comes all the way to this cell, it can't reach into this 4, so it's going to leave behind the singleton here. That's going to be an issue, so the 4 can't come up 2 spots. It can only come at most 1. But something we do know is it's going to have to come over at least 2. There are other options for it, but the 4 can't extend to the cell, or it causes an issue with this 4 to the right. With that leave behind, we now have a place where we need to have a non-1 in the cell. It's forced to be a 3. We get this all based on avoiding similar size things touching. This space needs to have a value in it. This 4 is going to come all the way across. We get this. Now we don't know if the 3 comes up to this space, but it has to at least come left 1. And we don't know if the 5 comes right to this space, but it has to at least come left and take these. And so with this as a starting point, we now break some of the lower right side into these groups, and again set up a situation where what we're leaving behind can become problematic. This is another good hidden polyomino spot. It's got to grow out at least 1 more cell, but now it's next to a 2. That's no good. It's already touching 3s. Turns out it has to be a full 4, which we have here. This 5, if it doesn't connect to this 5, would have to take all of these cells, but that strands this 3, so we can mark something like this in. If this 3 doesn't touch to this 3, it's going to come this way, but that leaves behind just 1 cell. That's no good, so it has to come down. You get this force shape in the corner because of how the 3s sit. The 4 is a little tricky, but recognize first that it could take all of these cells, but then the 5 left over does not have enough room. It basically can take a 4th, but if it takes this, it becomes too large. So the 4 has to take at least this cell. The 5 has to take at least this cell, so the 4 has to take 1 more. We're now in a place where this 4 can't extend and touch to this, so it's got to come up and extend and touch to this. Whichever cell it takes, this one or this one, will be a 3rd cell in this polyomino, so it can't take another and connect to this 4. So this 4 is isolated, comes all the way up on this side. get to where we have this shape. It can take a third cell here, but has to at least take this cell. The 5 is now squeezed like so. At this, we'll see that the 6 just now has one option left for it. The 5 doesn't want to take the bottom cell, takes the top cell. These are all just forced based on size. We have an issue where this 5 has to take one more. These behind these. So only this option left for the 4 and that option left at the end, and that finishes the grid. This shouldn't be too hard a puzzle, except again, some of these early steps where the leave behind of 2 cells and then 3 cells, and then a lot of the play around these 4s makes the very narrow path clockwise around the grid difficult to get into initially, and by the time you get to the bottom, it's a little bit of give and take to sort of see. I think the important things to learn, besides just the general leave behinds like we saw at the start, is where we have situations where we have some numbers we know can't touch, but they're near situations like 1s. The leave behinds have to allow for other shapes to be in that space so that this 4 can't extend to this. Is a trivial deduction once you know this kind of rule about thinking of what's left behind. But in this puzzle it wasn't trivial until you give it some amount of time to see it. So I hope you learned a little bit about Fillomino, this unusual example from Murat at least, and we'll see you again soon.